body camera is shaking. Officers are running. Someone is screaming in a way that doesn't sound human anymore. Inside a small trailer home in Phoenix, Arizona, 3 children are lying perfectly still on a couch, arranged as if they're sleeping. But they're not sleeping. They haven't been sleeping for hours. And the woman standing on the porch, the one telling police she just put them down for a nap, the one crying and asking why this is happening to her, she's their mother. Her name is Rachel Henry. She's 22 years old. And in less than 3 hours, she's going to confess to something so horrific that seasoned detectives will struggle to write the report. This is the story of what happened on January 20th, 2020. This is the story of Zane, Mira, and Catalina. And this is the story of the 73 minutes of body camera footage that captured a mother's unraveling, a family's destruction, and a crime so unthinkable that it forces us to confront the darkest question of all. How could a mother do this to her own children? It's 8 o'clock on a Monday evening in Phoenix. The sun set an hour ago. Most families are winding down for the night, baths, bedtime stories, tucking little ones into bed. But at this mobile home, sirens are piercing the quiet. Red and blue lights flash against aluminum siding. 2 Phoenix police officers approach the front door, their body cameras recording everything. They don't know it yet, but they're about to walk into a scene that will haunt them for the rest of their careers. The door opens. Immediately, you can hear chaos. Voices overlapping. Someone's hysterical. The officers step inside, and that's when they see them. 3 small children, lying on a worn couch in the living room. The oldest is 3. The youngest is 7 months old. They're arranged side by side, almost peacefully, as if someone carefully positioned them. But something is wrong. Terribly wrong. One of the officers moves closer. He reaches out, and then he recoils. The screaming that follows tells you everything you need to know. Outside on the porch, Rachel Henry is surrounded by family members. She's thin, with long dark hair pulled back. Her eyes are wide, darting. She keeps saying the same things over and over. I just put them down for a nap. I thought they were sleeping. They were sick. Her voice has a strange quality to it, not quite panicked, not quite calm. Something in between, something off. The officers are trying to keep everyone outside, away from the living room, but family members keep trying to go back in. Pearl, the children's great aunt, is sobbing uncontrollably. She's the one who discovered them. She's the one who called 911. And she's the one who, in a few minutes, is going to tell police something that will crack this case wide open. Let me take you back 6 hours. Because to understand what happened that night, you need to understand the hours leading up to it. Earlier that afternoon, Rachel was alone with her children. Zane, the 3-year-old, was energetic, always moving, obsessed with Spider-Man. Mira, 1-year-old, loved being held, especially by her father. And Catalina, just 7 months old, was beginning to understand both Spanish and English, her dark eyes always watching, always learning. Pedro Rios, the children's father, was at work. He lived in the home with Rachel, along with Pearl and her husband. It was a small space, a mobile home with cramped rooms and thin walls. Everyone could hear everything. According to what Rachel told police in those early moments, she'd been cleaning all day. The house was a mess. People kept telling her to clean. She felt overwhelmed. The kids were fussy. They wouldn't stop crying. She tried to calm them down. She gave them something to eat. She turned on a movie. And then, she said, they fell asleep. Just like that, all 3 of them, at 5:30 in the evening. She didn't think anything of it. She was relieved, actually. Finally, some quiet. She could finish cleaning. But here's what doesn't make sense. By 8 o'clock, when family members returned home, those children still hadn't woken up. And anyone who's ever been around young kids knows, a 3-hour nap at dinner time means you're in for a sleepless night. Pearl knew it. Pedro knew it. When Pedro went to check on them, when he reached down to wake Zane up, His hand touched cold skin. The body camera footage from inside that home is heavily redacted, but what you can hear is enough. Officers are shouting medical codes. Someone's performing CPR. You can hear the compressions, rhythmic, desperate, futile. One officer is on the radio calling for backup, for paramedics, for anyone who can help. But there's a horrible certainty in the air. These children have been dead for hours. Their bodies are stiff. Their lips are blue. This isn't a sudden tragedy. This is a crime scene. Outside, Rachel is still talking. She's telling officers that the kids were sick, that she didn't give them any medicine, that she thought they were just sleeping. But her story is already starting to shift. Listen to how she tells it. Everyone wanted me to clean the house. I was cleaning. I did laundry. They fell asleep watching a movie. I came home. Wait, no, I was here. He was on the couch. I told him to watch them. She's contradicting herself within seconds. She's pointing fingers. At one point, she suggests maybe someone else is responsible. Maybe the father should have checked on them more. Maybe it's his fault for lying on the couch. The officers are listening, documenting everything, but they're not buying it. Something about her demeanor is all wrong. She's crying, yes, but the words don't match the emotion. It's performative, rehearsed. Pearl is falling apart. At one point, she's on the phone with the children's grandmother, Rachel's mother, trying to explain what's happening, but she can't get the words out. The babies are dead, she finally says. All three of them. And then she breaks down completely, repeating, I can't believe it. I can't believe it, while officers try to console her. But Pearl knows something the officers don't know yet. Earlier that day, before any of this happened, Pearl had said something to Pedro. She'd said it casually, almost as a dark joke, but now it feels like a premonition. She'd said, I'm afraid we're going to come home one day and find her drowning the kids in the bathtub. Rachel was weird, Pearl said. There was something off about her. The way she looked at the children sometimes. The way she talked about them. Like they were burdens. Like they were in her way. Let's pause here for a moment. Because at this point in the story, you might be thinking, there has to be an explanation. Maybe it was carbon monoxide poisoning. Maybe it was something in the food. Maybe this was a tragic accident, and Rachel is just in shock, processing trauma in a strange way. That's what the officers were thinking too. They were hoping for any explanation other than the one that was starting to form in their minds. But as the minutes ticked by, as investigators began processing the scene, that hope evaporated. There were no signs of illness. No medications in the house beyond basic children's Tylenol. No gas leaks. No environmental factors. And when the medical examiner later performed the autopsies, the cause of death would be unmistakable: asphyxiation. All three children had been smothered. Rachel is sitting in a pickup truck now, away from the chaos. An officer is with her, a woman, trying to build rapport. This is a technique they use. Get the suspect comfortable, get them talking, let them reveal things without realizing it. And Rachel does talk. She talks about her life, about how hard things have been. She moved to Arizona from Oklahoma just a few months ago, looking for a fresh start. But things didn't go as planned. She lost her driver's license. She couldn't find a job. She had a drug problem, meth, she admits, but she's trying to get clean. She wants to turn her life around. She wants to go back to school. She wants better opportunities. She even asked God for forgiveness, she says. She wants to move forward, start fresh, forget her past. And as she's saying all of this, as she's talking about her hopes and dreams and her plans for self-improvement, her three children are lying dead inside that house. Do you hear what I'm hearing? There's no mention of them. No, I can't believe my babies are gone. No, please tell me they're okay. She's talking about herself, her problems, her future. It's as if the children were just obstacles that have now been removed, and she's already mentally moving on to the next chapter of her life. The officer listening to her is professional, controlled, but you can sense the disgust beneath the surface. At one point, Rachel says, "I just want to be a better person." And the officer responds, "You're very young. You've got a lot of time ahead of you." There's a pause, and then the officer adds, "You're probably going to need to go through some counseling." It's the understatement of the century. But let me tell you something about Rachel Henry that makes this even more disturbing. This wasn't the first time authorities had been concerned about her ability to care for her children. In Oklahoma, where the family lived before moving to Arizona, there had been multiple calls to Child Protective Services. Neighbors reported hearing the children crying for hours. There were concerns about the living conditions, about Rachel's drug use, about her mental state. At one point, all 3 children were temporarily removed from the home. They were placed in foster care while Rachel was supposed to complete a rehabilitation program and parenting classes. She did complete the program. She got the children back, and less than 6 months later, she moved them to Arizona. Away from the oversight, away from the social workers who were checking in, away from the family members in Oklahoma who might have noticed the warning signs. Pedro's family in Arizona didn't know the full extent of the problems. They knew Rachel struggled, they knew she had a past, but they believed she was trying to change. They gave her a place to live. They helped with the children. Pearl, especially, tried to be supportive. She'd watch the kids when Rachel needed a break. She'd help with groceries, with bills, with whatever was needed. But she also saw things that worried her. The way Rachel would sometimes just stare at the children with this blank expression. The way she'd lose her temper over small things. The way she'd talk about feeling trapped, about how different her life would be if she didn't have kids. Pearl told her husband about these concerns. She told Pedro, but what could they do? Rachel was the mother. She had rights, and without concrete evidence of abuse or neglect, there was nothing anyone could do except watch and hope and pray that their worst fears wouldn't come true. Around 9:30, detectives arrive. They've been briefed. They know what they're dealing with. Rachel is told she's going to be taken downtown for questioning, not because she's in trouble, the officer says, but because the detectives are already at their office and it'll be easier to talk there. Rachel agrees without hesitation. She's cooperative, calm, even. She asks if she can bring her water bottle. The officer walks her to the patrol car, opens the door, and she climbs in. No handcuffs yet, no arrest, just a ride downtown. But everyone knows what's about to happen. During that car ride, Rachel is quiet. The officer driving occasionally glances in the rearview mirror, watching her. Rachel stares out the window at the passing lights of Phoenix. What is she thinking about in this moment? Is she rehearsing her story? Is she feeling remorse? Is she afraid? Or has she disconnected so completely from reality that she genuinely believes she's going to talk to the detectives, explain what happened, and somehow go home? The officer later reported that Rachel seemed almost peaceful during that drive. Not agitated, not crying, just calm, disturbingly calm. At the police station, Rachel is placed in an interrogation room. It's small, fluorescent lit, with a table and a few chairs. A camera in the corner records everything. 2 detectives sit across from her. They start with the basics: her name, her age, where she's from. They're friendly at first, non-confrontational. They offer her water, tissues, sympathy. "We just want to understand what happened," they say. "Help us understand." And slowly, carefully, they begin to dismantle her story. Every inconsistency, every contradiction, every impossible detail. They point it out gently, giving her a chance to explain. But Rachel can't explain, because there is no explanation that makes sense. Not unless she tells the truth. The interrogation lasts for hours. The detectives use every technique in their playbook. They build rapport. They express sympathy. They suggest possible explanations that might make Rachel feel less guilty. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe she didn't mean to hurt them. Maybe she was so overwhelmed that she just snapped. They tell her that everyone makes mistakes, that they're not there to judge her. They just want to know what really happened. And slowly, incrementally, Rachel's defenses begin to crumble. She starts to cry, real tears this time, not the performative crying from earlier. Her hands are shaking. She's rocking back and forth in her chair. And then, in almost a whisper, she says, "I couldn't take it anymore." They wouldn't stop. They were always crying, always needing something. I just wanted them to be quiet. And then, after hours of back and forth, after the detectives have exhausted every other possibility, Rachel breaks completely. She stops crying. She stops fidgeting. She looks up at them and she confesses. What she says next will become part of the official police affidavit, and it will be read in courtrooms, discussed by legal experts, and analyzed by psychologists trying to understand how a mother could do what Rachel Henry did. She started with Mira, the 1-year-old. They were playing, Rachel said, wrestling on the floor, just normal mom and daughter stuff. But then Rachel noticed how small Mira was, how fragile, how easy it would be to stop her breathing. So she did. She put her hand over Mira's mouth and nose. Mira kicked. She fought, her little legs flailing, trying to push her mother away. But Rachel didn't stop. She kept her hand there, pressing down, using her weight, until Mira stopped kicking. Zane, the 3-year-old, saw what was happening. He yelled, no. He tried to help his sister. He punched Rachel, hitting her with his tiny fists, trying to make her stop. But he was 3 years old. What could he do? Think about that for a moment. Think about Zane, this little boy who loved Spider-Man, who was supposed to be protected by his mother, watching as she killed his sister. And his instinct, his immediate, beautiful, heartbreaking instinct, was to try to save her. To fight back, to protect his baby sister even though he was just a baby himself. That's the kind of child Zane was. That's who we lost that day. Rachel was interrupted by Pearl and her husband coming home. So she acted normal. She smiled. She chatted. And then she took Zane into a back bedroom, telling him she needed to change his diaper. She laid him on the floor, straddled him, and put her hand over his nose and mouth. Zane scratched her chest, pinched her, tried to breathe. And Rachel sang to him. She sang a lullaby while she suffocated her son. She used her body weight to hold him down until he stopped moving. The detectives asked her what song she sang. She couldn't remember, or wouldn't say, but she remembered that Zane's eyes were open, that he was looking at her, that he knew what was happening. And then there was Catalina, 7 months old, too young to fight back, too young to understand. Rachel fed her a bottle until she fell asleep. And then, singing softly, she placed her hand over the baby's face and held it there until Catalina stopped breathing. This took the longest, Rachel said. Babies are resilient. Their survival instincts are strong. It took several minutes for Catalina to die. Several minutes of Rachel holding her hand over her daughter's face, watching as the baby's bodies slowly went still. When it was over, when all 3 of her children were dead, Rachel arranged them on the couch. She positioned them carefully, side by side, as if they were napping. She smoothed their hair. She adjusted their clothes. She even covered them with a blanket. And then she went back to cleaning the house. She did laundry. She tidied up. She washed the dishes. She swept the floor. She acted as if it were just another normal evening. And she waited. She waited for everyone to come home. She waited for someone to discover what she'd done. Because in some twisted part of her mind, Rachel believed that once the children were gone, her problems would be gone too. She'd be free. She'd be able to start over. She'd be able to be the person she always wanted to be. Why did she do it? That's the question everyone's been asking since that night. Prosecutors believe it was the meth. That Rachel was high, paranoid, overwhelmed, and in a drug-fueled psychosis, she convinced herself the children were better off dead. Her defense attorneys argue she was mentally ill, suffering from postpartum depression and psychosis, unable to distinguish right from wrong. Some experts suggest it was a combination of factors: the drugs, the mental illness, the stress, the isolation, the feeling of being trapped in a life she never wanted. But here's what we know for certain: Rachel Henry made a choice. She chose to kill Mira first, knowing Zane was watching. She chose to kill Zane next, even as he tried to save his sister. She chose to kill Catalina last, singing to her while she murdered her. These weren't impulsive acts. They were deliberate, methodical, and sequential. She had time between each death to stop, to call for help, to change her mind. But she didn't. In the days following the murders, the family held a vigil. Candles were lit, prayers were said, photos of Zane, Mira, and Catalina were displayed, smiling, innocent, full of life. Pedro was there, barely able to stand, held up by relatives. Pearl was there, still in shock, still replaying that moment when she picked up Zane's stiff body. Rachel's mother was there, flown in from Oklahoma, trying to reconcile the daughter she raised with the monster who killed her grandchildren. How do you process that? How do you mourn the victims and grieve the perpetrator at the same time when they're your own family? The vigil was held in a small park near the mobile home. Hundreds of people showed up: neighbors who never met the children, community members who just wanted to show support, other parents who couldn't imagine what Pedro was going through. Someone brought stuffed animals. Someone else brought flowers. A local church organized the event, providing counseling services for anyone who needed them. Because this kind of tragedy doesn't just affect the family, it ripples outward, touching everyone who hears about it, everyone who tries to make sense of it, everyone who holds their own children a little tighter that night. Pedro stood at the front, surrounded by photos of his children. He tried to speak, but he couldn't get the words out. His brother spoke for him, reading a statement Pedro had written. It talked about how much he loved his children, how Zane was his little buddy, always wanting to help Dad with everything. How Mira had just started walking, taking those wobbly first steps that filled him with pride. How Catalina was beginning to smile, recognizing his face when he came home from work. The statement ended with a question: how'd I go on without them? How'd I wake up every day knowing they're gone? The case against Rachel Henry was airtight. She confessed. The physical evidence matched her confession. The autopsies confirmed the cause of death. Prosecutors announced they would seek the death penalty, citing the age of the victims, the premeditation, and the especially cruel nature of the crimes. Rachel pleaded not guilty, despite her confession, setting up what would likely be an insanity defense. But as of now, 5 years later, the trial still hasn't happened. It's been delayed repeatedly: COVID, motions, legal wrangling. The families are still waiting for justice. Pedro is still waiting to stand in that courtroom and face the woman who killed his children. And Rachel Henry sits in jail, held without bond, waiting for her day in court. During these 5 years of delays, Rachel has been evaluated by multiple psychiatrists. Some have diagnosed her with severe mental illness, schizophrenia, postpartum psychosis, dissociative disorders. Others have found her competent to stand trial, aware of right and wrong, fully responsible for her actions. The legal system moves slowly, especially in death penalty cases. Every motion must be carefully considered. Every piece of evidence must be thoroughly examined. And while the lawyers argue and the judges deliberate, Pedro visits his children's graves. He brings flowers. He talks to them. He tells them about his day, about how much he misses them, about how he's fighting to make sure their mother is held accountable for what she did. Pearl struggles with guilt. She knew something was wrong. She'd even joked about Rachel drowning the kids. Why didn't she do more? Why didn't she insist on staying home that day? Why didn't she call Child Protective Services when she first noticed the warning signs? These questions torment her. Therapists tell her it's not her fault, that she couldn't have known, that Rachel fooled everyone. But the guilt remains. The what-ifs haunt her dreams. Rachel's own mother is perhaps the most tragic figure in all of this. She lost her grandchildren, and she lost her daughter, not to death, but to something worse. She's seen the body camera footage. She's read the confession. She knows what Rachel did. But she's also the woman who gave birth to Rachel, who raised her, who loved her. And now she's left wondering, where did I go wrong? What did I miss? Could I have prevented this? These are questions without answers. These are wounds that will never fully heal. But here's the question that no one can answer, the question that will haunt you long after this story ends. What was Rachel Henry thinking in those final moments with each child? When Mira was kicking, fighting for her life, what was going through Rachel's mind? When Zane was scratching her, begging her to stop, did she feel anything? When she held that bottle for Catalina, feeding her before she killed her, did she look into her daughter's eyes and see a human being? Or had she already convinced herself of something else entirely? Some psychologists suggest that Rachel had completely dehumanized her children. That in her drug-addled, mentally unstable mind, they weren't people anymore. They were obstacles. They were sources of stress. They were things that prevented her from living the life she wanted. Other experts argue that Rachel knew exactly what she was doing, that her actions were calculated and deliberate, that she simply valued her own freedom and comfort more than her children's lives. The truth is probably somewhere in between. The truth is probably more complicated than any simple explanation can capture. We know what she did. We know how she did it. But the why, the real why, the deep psychological truth of what drives a mother to annihilate her own children, that remains a mystery. And maybe that's the most terrifying part of all. Because if we can't understand it, we can't predict it, we can't prevent it, we can only bear witness to the aftermath and hope that somehow, some way, justice will be served for Zane, Mira, and Catalina. 3 innocent children who deserved to grow up, who deserved to live, and who were taken from this world by the one person who should have protected them above all else. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about motherhood, about mental illness, about the warning signs we miss or ignore. It reminds us that not all monsters look like monsters. Sometimes they look like struggling young mothers. Sometimes they live in our neighborhoods. Sometimes they smile and wave and seem perfectly normal until the moment they're not. And it reminds us that the most dangerous place for a child isn't with strangers. It's in their own home, with the people who are supposed to love them unconditionally. The officers who responded that night still carry the trauma of what they saw. Some have sought counseling. Some have left law enforcement entirely. The paramedics who arrived hoping to save those children but found only bodies, they carry that weight too. The detectives who had to sit across from Rachel and listen to her describe, in horrifying detail, how she murdered her babies, they'll never forget those words. This case touched dozens of lives, ruined careers, destroyed families, and left a community questioning everything they thought they knew about the people living next door. If this story shook you, if it made you hold your own children a little tighter, there's another story on your screen right now. One I believe was made for you. Because we can't look away. We can't pretend these things don't happen. Someone has to remember Zane, Mira, Catalina. Someone has to say their names. Someone has to make sure that their short lives meant something. That their deaths weren't in vain. That other children might be saved because we learned from this tragedy. Click the story on your screen. Because these stories need to be told. And these children deserve to be remembered.